I dozed on and off, waking as Kishan put more wood on the fire. I wasn't sure how he found wood that was dry enough to burn, but I didn't care enough to ask. He placed the pan of liquid he'd bathed my wounds with near the flames to keep it warm. I was snug in my sleeping bag lying on my stomach, and through a languid daze, I watched the flames lick the bottom of the pot. The herbal smell of the hot liquid suffused the air, and I drifted in and out. At some point, I must have slept because I dreamed of Ren. He was lashed to a post with his hands tied over his head. I stood against a wall behind another post where Lokesh couldn't see me. He spoke in another language and tapped a whip against his hand. Ren opened his eyes and saw me. He didn't move a limb or twitch a muscle, but his eyes stirred. They brightened, and tiny, crinkly lines appeared on the sides. I smiled at him and took a step toward him. He shook his head slightly. I heard the crack of the whip and froze. Ren gasped in pain. I burst from my hiding place screaming and attacked a surprised Lokesh. I grabbed the whip, but I couldn't tear it from his grasp. He was extremely strong. It was as futile a gesture as a bird attacking a tree. I thrashed and struggled and saw the unmitigated thrill of delight as he recognized me. Fevered excitement reached his glittering black eyes. He grabbed my hands and twisted them together above my head, then brought his whip down across the back of my legs 3 times. I cried out in pain. A roar behind me stole his attention. I grabbed his shirt and raked my fingernails across his throat and chest. He shook me.
Kelsey, wake up.
I woke with a start. Kishan?
You were dreaming again.
He was zipped into the sleeping bag with me. He gently pried my fingers from his shirt. I looked at his chest and throat and saw vicious, bloody scratches. I touched one gently. Oh, Kishan, I'm so sorry. Does it hurt badly?
It's okay. They're healing as we speak.
I didn't mean to. I was dreaming of Lokesh again. I don't want to go back, Kishan. I want to keep moving, keep looking for the spirit gate. Ren is suffering, I know it. To my great dismay, I started weeping. I wept partly because of the pain in my legs, partly because of the stress of the journey, but the biggest reason I wept was because I knew that Ren was hurting. Kishan shifted and wrapped his arms around me.
Shh, Kelsey. It's going to be all right.
You don't know that. Lokesh may kill him before we find the stupid spirit gate, I cried while Kishan rubbed my back.
Remember? Durga said she'd watch over him. Don't forget about that.
I sobbed. I know, but...
Your safety is more important than the quest, and Ren would agree with that.
I laughed wetly. He probably would, but...
No buts. We need to head back, Kels. Once you heal, we can come back and try again. Agreed?
I guess so.
Good. Ren is lucky to hold the heart of a woman such as you, Kelsey.
I turned on my side to look at him. The fire was still going, and I watched the flames dance in his troubled golden eyes. I touched his now healed neck and said softly, "And I'm lucky to have such wonderful men in my life." He brought my hand to his lips and pressed a warm kiss on my fingers.
He wouldn't want you to suffer for him, you know.
He wouldn't like you being the one to comfort me either. He grinned at that.
No, indeed he wouldn't.
But you do. Comfort me, I mean. Thank you for being here.
There's nowhere else I'd rather be. Get some sleep, Bilauta.
He pulled me close and nestled me against his chest. I felt guilty for feeling comforted lying in Kishan's arms, but I fell asleep quickly without further incident. The next 2 days of travel were short by necessity. I tried to walk on my own, but the pain was too much, so Kishan carried me. We walked back down the mountain slowly, stopping to rest from time to time, saving the last hour for Kishan to set up camp and tend to me. Most of my wounds were healing, but the deep one had started to fester. The skin around it had become ruddy, swollen, and inflamed. The wound was obviously getting worse. I began running a fever, and Kishan started to feel desperate. He cursed the fact that he could only travel with me for 6 hours of the day. He used every herbal remedy he could think of. Unfortunately, the golden fruit could not produce antibiotics. A storm hit, and I was vaguely aware of Kishan carrying me through icy sleet. Not moving on my own made me more susceptible to the cold. I was freezing and drifted in and out, unaware of how many days had passed. At one point, the thought occurred to me that Phanindra might heal me as she did in Kishkinda, but she remained stiff and frozen. I knew the weather wasn't exactly snake-friendly, but perhaps she knew I wasn't quite at death's door yet either, despite all outward appearances. We became lost in the storm, not knowing if we were going back to Mr. Kadam or forward to the Spirit Gate. Kishan was constantly worried about me falling asleep, so he talked to me as we walked. I didn't remember much of what he said. He did lecture me about survival in the wilderness, and said that it was important that we stay warm, eat, and keep hydrated. He had those 3 things pretty much covered. When we stopped for the day, he would wrap me in the sleeping bag and crawl in next to me so his tiger body could keep me warm. And the golden fruit provided as much food and drink as we could handle. I lost my appetite when I became sick. Kishan forced me to eat and drink, but I was shaky, and the fever made me feel like I was either freezing or too hot. He had to change to a man often to keep me covered with the sleeping bag because, in my fever, I constantly tried to push it off. I was weak now, and spent my time either staring at the sky or at Kishan's face as he spoke of various things. Bushman's rice was one topic I remembered because it was disgusting. He talked about how he'd managed to live when he'd been the only survivor of a battle deep in enemy territory. He said that there was no food to be found, so he ate Bushman's rice, which was not rice at all, but the white pupae of termites. I grunted softly in reaction, but was too sleepy to move my lips to form a comment. I wanted to ask him how he learned about Australian bushmen back in his time, but I couldn't speak. He looked down at me, worried, and drew my hood closer over my face so the snow wouldn't fall directly on me. He leaned over and whispered,
I promise. I'll get you out of this, Kelsey. I won't let you die.
Die? Who said anything about dying? I had no intention of dying. But I couldn't exactly tell him that. My lips felt like they were frozen. I can't die. I have to find the next 3 items and save my tigers. I have to rescue Ren from Lokesh. I have to finish school. I fell asleep. I dreamed of tracing my finger down an icy window. I had just made a heart with a Ren plus Kelsey in the middle, and had drawn a second heart with Kishan plus, when someone shook me awake.
Kels. I thought we had turned back, but I think we found the Spirit Gate.
I peeked out of my hood and looked up at an amethyst gray sky. Painful icy sleet pummeled us, and I had to squint to see what Kishan was pointing at. In the middle of a barren white stretch of snow stood 2 wooden posts about the size of telephone poles. Wrapped around each one were long ropes of material that flapped wildly in the storm like homemade kite tails. A line of colorful flags were attached at different sections of the posts. Some of the ropes were tied to the opposite pole. Some were attached to rings in the ground, and others just flapped loose in the wind. I licked my lips and whispered, "Are you sure?" Fortunately, his tiger hearing was extremely good. He bent over close to my ear and shouted over the wind,
"It could be a monument or a memorial created by nomads. But there's just something different about this. I want to check it out."
I nodded weakly, and he set me down in the sleeping bag near one of the poles.